This is Dr. Leonard again, and I'd like to give you a little bit of information about how the course is set up. GEO 207 or RST 207, Biblical Geography. So just a little bit about the Bible itself. It's the most popular religious book in history and remains the most read book in the world. So it makes some sense for us, whether we are religious or non-religious, to pay attention to it. It forms the foundation for a lot of Western civilization. So in that sense, this is a humanities class because we'll be looking at this ancient text and seeing what it has to say about geography primarily, but also we'll be looking at the general context and the general story to get an idea of what's going on. So we've got in the Bible narrative history books, poetry books, wisdom literature, prophetic books, letters written to various people by various people. So it's written by a number of authors over a period of maybe 1,500 years, from about 1400 BC to about 100 AD. And so it's this broad bunch of books, collection of books, you might say, inside the Bible itself. And because we have only a limited amount of time in this class, we'll pay the most attention to the narrative books, the ones that are sort of just, this is what happened, and here's where they went, and this is what happened here, and this is where they traveled. Those kind of things are mostly in these narrative books, or at least the portions of books that are narrative. And they'll have references to geographical ideas, and so we'll pay most attention to those. Most of the places that we'll run across that are mentioned in the Bible have been positively identified with real places through history and archaeological surveys, and we'll focus on them, but we'll also be looking at some places that we're not really sure where they were. The Bible writers had in mind where they were, but modern humans, modern scholars can't find them, or are not sure which town might be, or mountain might be associated with the Bible town or mountain that was mentioned. But we'll focus on the ones that we know most of the locations for. Here's just an overview, and you can see here these first 5 books often have references to places, and these books of history here will also have lots of references to places, some in poetry, some in the prophets, have references to places and to geographical phenomenon. And we'll bring those in as we see fit, but we'll kind of stick with the story as told in these first few books of the Old Testament. Then in the New Testament, you've got the life of Jesus, which has some geographical references. In fact, in general, the New Testament has less geographical references, you might call them, than the Old Testament. But anyway, so the 4 Gospels that tell the life of Jesus, the book of Acts, which tells the history of the church, that's pretty much where we'll cut off our study. Now, it's true that each of these letters written, they'll have a location where the author was, they'll have a location where the audience was, and those can be important in interpreting those books as well, and other things about ancient cultures and how they were distributed. Those might have an effect on your personal reading, but we're really going to stop really with the book of Acts, which is also gives a pretty good idea of the geography of the early Christian church. So I've made some choices for this class just for convenience and to set things up the way I want it to run, but I want you to know about those right here at the beginning. First off, this Bible was written primarily in ancient Greek and Hebrew, and we're going to use a modern English translation, of course, because we don't speak those ancient languages. And I'm going to pick the New International Version. It is a modern translation. It will use terminology that refers to geographical ideas pretty uniformly, and so it's a decent modern English translation. I will be assigning you Bible readings, and those Bible readings serve a couple of purposes. Number one, so you can get background of what's going on, the context of what the stories are about. And then another purpose will be, of course, when they mention specific geographic ideas. And so we'll have some of those. And I'll have a reading list in Blackboard for you to take a look at. And I'll talk about that as we go through the class. I'm going to use the dating system BC AD. BC stands for before Christ. AD stands for Anno Domini, which would mean in the year of the Lord, referring to Jesus. And that was the traditional system used up until maybe 30 or 40 years ago, used for, a millennium or more. 30 or 40 years ago, people came up with a system called BCE and CE. And so BCE would mean before the Common Era, which is equivalent to the BC dates. And CE means the Common Era, which is equivalent to the AD dates. And so some people prefer that. They seem to be a little less sort of religiously tied to Christianity. But I'll stick with BC and AD. So textbooks that you'll need for the class: the Bible itself, and you can access the NIV, the New International Version, online. I gave you one link there, BibleGateway.com. Other places that you can access it online for free as well. I like to read paper copies of books. So if you do as well, you can find an NIV at any or many bookstores, including online bookstores, for $5 or less. Second textbook you'll need is the Oxford Bible Atlas 4th edition. And you can access it for free from Marshall's library. So you just go to marshall.edu/library, and there'll be a search box. If you scroll down just a little bit, a search box called Summon. And in that search box, you can just type anything you want to, but in this case, for our class, type Oxford Bible Atlas. You'll come up with a list of results, and the very first one will be the one that you need, 4th edition, and you can just click Full Text Online. It will let you then read it on your screen instead of purchasing a copy. So you can get it for free if you want. If you don't and you want to read a paper copy like me, then you can get a new one from Amazon or another bookseller for about $25. So you could invest $0 in textbooks, read them online, or you could invest maybe $30 and have them in paper. Up to you. Either one will work. Additional readings that are not Bible related, that apply to archaeological finds, or perhaps they apply archaeology to geography, or are sort of other atlases, Bible atlases that are useful. Also have some videos that I'll link to. And I include these. Some of them will be required to finish the material in the class, and many of them are optional. So be sure when you look at the material in Blackboard that you look for that designation. Is this a required or an optional thing? Of course, I encourage you to read it all. But if you have to make a choice, then make sure you read the required stuff. And we'll talk about that as class progresses as well. So we're going to be looking at what people call the Holy Land, other people call Palestine, other people call in ancient times Canaan. In fact, this word Canaan was used not just by ancient Jews in the Bible, but also by other civilizations nearby. So including the Egyptians, the ancient Egyptians called this area Canaan, or some form of that word. Or Levant. Levant is a general term that we'll talk about as class progresses, but this part of the Levant will be called the Southern Levant. So all of those terms might be ones that I use interchangeably to talk about the region, our main area of study. Now, of course, the Bible talks about events that occurred outside this region, but most of the focus in the Bible is on this region here, and that's what we're going to look at in this class.